Enkrid quickly turned his head, moving reflexively based on his sense of evasion. He took in and assessed the surrounding situation in an instant.
Cry stick chest sword!
Enkrid noticed something murky emanating from the sword embedded in the altar. The gray substance spread around and enveloped the area. Esther's body sprang forward, aiming towards the path they had come from. Just as she was about to escape, a gray barrier blocked her path. The panther was thrown back after hitting the barrier, and Enkrid reached out to catch it. His movements were swift like the wind. Cradling the panther gently, Enkrid scanned the surroundings while placing a hand on the sword's grip. The atmosphere was tense, as if something could jump out at any moment.
Finn.
At his command, Finn stood behind Enkrid. Luaguin took care of Kreis, pulling him back while he was standing there holding a stick, and she also stood on guard. Without having time to check on Esther, Enkrid's danger sense kicked in. It was an ability that only Enkrid, who had died countless times, possessed. And then, there was nothing, absolutely nothing.
What is this?
Meanwhile, Kreis mumbled something. Enkrid's gaze shifted in that direction.
Kya.
Esther spoke, seemingly unharmed by the barrier's impact. After setting down the panther, Enkrid approached Kreis. It seemed Kreis had opened a chest with a stick. Inside, instead of poison arrows, there was only dust and a small letter. Kreis unfolded the letter, muttering things like, "Has it already been looted?" or "Is Dolph insane?"
Let me see.
Enkrid approached to examine the letter. "Only those who obtain the treasure may leave. Did they enter through the back? Sorry, but this is the only trap here." As the sound of the torch burning filled the air, Enkrid let out a groan. It felt as if the letter's writer, Dolph, was laughing sinisterly. "So, treasure?" The chest was empty. What about the other chest? Just then, Kreis opened the remaining chest with the stick.
Nothing here.
That one was empty too.
In this era they called a backdoor a rear exit, huh? Damn it, treasure, my foot!
Kreis grabbed his head in frustration. An ancient symbol had left a modern, quick-witted soldier in despair. It was unavoidable. It was a trap interwoven with magic, and such a trick was difficult for anyone to anticipate.
Anyone would have been caught in this.
Finn also agreed. Enkrid turned his head, leaving the wide-eyed Finn behind, and saw the sword standing silently on the platform. The sword, which had been covered in moss and dust earlier, had changed. Its blade now glowed faintly with a bluish tint. The handle was still worn and rusty, and the blade was blunt.
The blade's color has changed.
Could it have been maintained in a place like this? Did someone look after it? Perhaps they placed a skeleton soldier to oil the blade. It was clear that the blade wasn't sharp, and it was quite old. However, it was remarkable that the blade had remained intact for such a long time. Usually, weapons like swords become useless if not maintained. It was common for weapons found in ancient dungeons to break apart after a single swing, as they were often badly degraded by time. For a mercenary, a weapon is life, and those lacking confidence in their skills often rely on their weapons. Over the years, Enkrid had paid close attention to his weapons. Thus, he had an eye for swords. The sword with a blunt blade and a handle so fragile it seemed ready to crumble if gripped too tightly.
It still has life in it.
It was an intact piece, although it needed some care. That was the only thing one could call a treasure here.
How long has it been since this Dolph person made this?
Enkrid asked.
At least 50 years!
Kreis replied with an astonished expression, shifting his gaze. With only the sword left, everyone's attention naturally turned to it. A sword left standing for 50 years was in better condition than expected. If that wasn't a treasure, what was?
It's the only thing left, so I'll try to pull it out.
Kreis's frustration was brief. He quickly stood up, muttered something about Dolph being a bastard, and stepped forward. Despite his natural talent for hiding and running away, he couldn't ignore the mess he had created. Without a word, Kreis grabbed the sword but quickly let go.
Ouch!
He seemed startled. As everyone looked at him curiously, Kreis continued.
No, it's like some crazy guy with a sword is chasing me.
Just by grabbing the sword, it felt like a madman was chasing after him with a sword.
Let me try.
Finn stepped forward. Bravery and sometimes recklessness were synonyms for a ranger. Rangers, who were brave but sometimes reckless, were the first to step forward. Before anyone could stop her, Finn grabbed the sword and then let go just as quickly.
It's true.
Enkrid's gaze rested on the sword's handle.
A cursed sword.
Luagern said, glaring at the sword. She waved her hand in the air dismissively and puffed her cheeks.
A cursed sword, my foot.
She stepped forward and placed her hand on the sword's handle. Swoosh, thud. Enkrid let out a soft sound of disapproval. Luagern tried again. Slip. Her hand slid off the grip without being able to hold it.
I saw something for a moment.
Frogs have a peculiar slickness to their skin, which is why they use loops to handle weapons. The cursed sword was too smooth and slippery for her to grip. It didn't even have a proper pommel at the end of the grip.
That's the only thing here that looks like a treasure.
Cray spoke, glancing at the sword. It seemed they needed to pull out that sword.
Can we trust the words left by that guy Dolph?
Enkrid asked. If they pulled out the sword believing it was a treasure, and it turned out to be a trap meant to kill them, they'd be in trouble.
Yes, well, we should trust it, right? Dolph, bastard as he is, lived his life with integrity and was known never to lie. It's a pretty credible statement.
If such a person lied, it would be serious, but for now, they had no choice but to believe. Enkrid thought this as he shook his head slightly and stood before the sword. Slip, slip. Even then, Luagarne was still trying to grip the sword.
I can see it, a guy holding a sword.
She seemed to be half closing her eyes in concentration.
A cursed sword, huh?
Kreis muttered, fiddling with his fingers. They needed to pull out the sword, but if they grabbed it, some crazy guy would come chasing after them with a sword. Even though it was brief, he didn't want to experience that again. He didn't want to see it. Cold sweat ran down his back. Luagarne gave up trying to grip the sword and shook her hand, saying,
A cursed sword, or rather, a sword possessed by an evil spirit.
An evil spirit? Enkrid had wandered the continent quite a bit, but he had only encountered an evil spirit once. It was called a wraith, a type of evil spirit that fed on human anxiety and fear. He had been hired for the job but couldn't handle it. The village had already been completely corrupted by evil spirits. It had been a horrific experience. The ragtag mercenaries armed with iron had no way to deal with it. They needed a priest, one capable of performing holy rituals.
How much did that cost back then?
Enkrid had spent his own money. He had taken the job and intended to solve it. That was his thinking. The funny part was that the one who made the request was a ghost. It was the remnant of a human soul that hadn't become an evil spirit, constantly crying and wishing. A young girl's wish had been so desperate that she had disguised herself as a city beggar and made the request. Enkrid had fulfilled the promise, eliminating the evil spirits from that village.
I think I spent all my money.
When summoning a priest, especially one capable of using holy powers to banish evil spirits, it required a significant amount of krona. The point is, evil spirits were not something ordinary mercenaries could handle. While Enkrid was lost in his thoughts, Kreis muttered.
Oh, so if I had kept holding on to it?
Luagarne immediately responded.
It would have split your head open.
It was a chilling answer. As Kreis nervously rubbed his arm, Enkrid casually raised his hand. Pull out the sword and take it. Then leave. It was a simple premise. He was also curious. Enkrid gripped the sword's handle. Even without blinking, he could tell the surroundings had changed. The air density was different. He was standing on sticky mud. The mud was like a trap, pulling at his feet. Then something fell from above. It was a sword, its blade descending vertically. His body reacted instinctively, drawing and swinging his sword horizontally to meet the vertical blade. The moment they clashed, he pushed back with force. With a heavy noise, the floating sword in the mist was pushed back. He took advantage of the recoil, retreating, but the slippery ground made it difficult to find footing. As he pushed off the ground with a thud, the wind picked up, and the misty figure behind the floating sword dissipated. Beyond the dissipating mist, his opponent became visible. A helmet and plate armor with blue flames in place of eyes within the helmet.
What is this?
There was no speech or breath. He couldn't sense any indication of an impending attack. Something essential that a human should possess was absent. The sword simply began to move. With a few strikes exchanged, Enkrid realized his body wasn't responding as usual.
The heart of great strength isn't working.
He had lost something he had. While his reaction speed was roughly the same, his body felt stiff. Most concerning was the opponent's swordsmanship. It was astonishingly formal, as if anticipating several moves ahead. Every time he instinctively and reflexively struck, the opponent seemed to deflect his sword and prepare for the next attack. This time it was a thrust, gasp, He inhaled sharply and stepped back. He had to retreat. He needed to shift his consciousness back to the outside world immediately. Instinctively, he understood how to escape from this place. The problem was that his opponent was too close.
In the meantime, I'll be cut.
It was a clear fact. Regardless of his physical abilities, the opponent seemed to read Enkrid's every move. The result was clear. He was struck in the abdomen by an iron-clad gauntlet. Enkrid didn't just take the hit. He swung his sword with force, aiming for the opponent's shoulder. He had aimed for the neck, but was blocked by the shoulder plate.
It was red.
He narrowly avoided the next slash, but then took an elbow to the cheekbone. When you've had your neck broken several times, there's something you come to know. This level of damage means death.
Irk.
Enkrid gasped, a death rattle. That seemed to be the end. He thought he was dead, but when he opened his eyes, he was back to reality. He had escaped from the realm of the mind, or perhaps an evil spirit's playground.
Captain.
Chrysa's large eyes looked at him along with Finn, Luagerne, and Esther.
Are you okay?
How much time has passed?
Enkrid asked, rubbing his throat as if it felt dry. The pain was vividly lingering, and his neck felt cold, but it hadn't twisted in the wrong direction. Only the pain and the moment of death remained.
It felt like less than a minute.
Enkrid frowned. It was unusual. He had died, yet he hadn't. It felt like he was fighting bare-handed in that place, using only the sword to communicate, leaving everything else behind. For Enkrid, it was no different from fighting without arms and legs.
Are you really okay?
Yes.
Nodding at Chrysa's question, Enkrid pondered over the sword. It hadn't been pulled out. It was the same as before, like looking at a noble lady. Though inside the sword there was just a piece of metal.
Did I fail?
Luagarn asked from the side.
My neck was broken.
Inside there?
Enkrid nodded. Hearing that, Luagarn fell into thought. They couldn't physically harm an evil spirit, but the evil spirit hadn't been able to harm Enkrid either. It was the same as during that old job. Could it be the same situation now? It didn't seem like it. It felt real. Even knowing it was fake, it was just like actually dying. Enkrid knew this because he was in a sense an expert in dying, having experienced it countless times. Meanwhile, Luagarne examined the gray barrier. She touched it with her fingers, tapping and probing it. On the other side, Esther was scratching the barrier with her claws.
Does that panther know something?
Finn mumbled, surprised at what she saw.
Maybe.
Enkrid knew that the lake panther by his side wasn't ordinary. Everyone was busy trying to grasp the situation. The answer came from Luagern. After tapping the barrier, observing the sword, and repeatedly failing to grip it due to its slipperiness, she spoke.
It's a bit of a guess.
What is it?
Enkrid asked. She spoke in a serious tone. Though it was hard to read a frog's emotions, she seemed somewhat uncertain. Her explanation sounded plausible.
You probably have to die dozens of times. Only then will you see something like a treasure.
For Enkrid, it was a relatively easy task, but Luagern wouldn't have known that. The sword was originally not a cursed blade. Although it was said to be possessed by an evil spirit, it wasn't truly haunted. In reality, it was more like a manifestation of a mindset. However, in the past, a certain genius wizard had a brilliant idea and realized it through his spells.
Isn't there a way to pass down abilities to descendants?
He pondered and thought about it. His genius idea soon led to its realization. However, while his magical talent was exceptional, his understanding of humans was severely lacking. The spirit bound to the sword existed solely for the purpose of imparting a single teaching. As a result, every person who tried to learn from it ended up bleeding from their ears. It was not a proper way to pass on knowledge. After this failure, the wizard developed a method to pass on the skills of swordsmen or warriors, skills that involve physical techniques.
I will make swordsmanship be passed down through generations.
Thus, the cursed sword known as Tutor was created.
Dolph, wasn't it? It seems like you really hated your descendants.
Luagarn said, slapping her cheek with her tongue in a gesture of frustration. The cursed sword Tutor, though it bordered on necromancy, did not drink blood or turn its wielder into a berserker. What happens when you imprison a human spirit in a sword? The wizard did not understand humans. He knew nothing about them. He sacrificed a person's mind and soul. Thus, the Tutor contained a soul with only one purpose. Regardless of whether the learner died or bled from their ears, it focused solely on its task. To learn a single technique, one had to cross the mountain of death dozens of times. Only by surpassing the opponent with the same swordsmanship would the soul trapped in tutor disappear. The treasure being referred to here is probably
Swordsmanship.
Luagern blinked one eye.
It's a matter of obtaining the swordsmanship. But while the body might not die, the mind may not withstand the death. So, it's better to find another way to open the veil rather than dealing with that sword.
Luagern said, and Enkrid, after briefly glancing at the sword, turned his gaze back to Luagarni and asked,
So, you're saying one must learn swordsmanship even at the risk of death?
Yes, it's an absurd thing. What human could possibly do that?
Luagarni's tongue slapped her cheek again. Was this similar to a human clicking their tongue?
Ah, damn, my mistake. I apologize.
Kreis lowered his head.
Heh, this is maddening. We can survive for over 2 weeks with our remaining food, but can't we dig a tunnel up or down?
Finn said she was frustrated, but as a ranger she immediately thought of alternative strategies. And Esther was asleep, lying on her stomach. Is she really sleepy in this situation? Enkrid looked around at everyone, thinking.
So we just need to learn swordsmanship at the risk of death.
Hey, that sounds like a scam.
He felt like a ferryman would mumble that to him in a dream. Honestly, compared to being poisoned to death while surrounded by a group of gnolls.
Isn't this easy?
Enkrid frowned. Could this really be true? It seemed almost too easy. When had things in life ever been so simple? Probably not. Just learn swordsmanship? No way.
Is there a chance of another trap?
Well, if there were any loops, I could probably handle it.
Luagern said, showing her smooth palm. Enkrid, after contemplating if that was truly all, finally said,
I'll do it.
Enduring death multiple times is not an easy task. Do you want me to show you how it feels?
Luagern was angry. The human mind erodes easily. Yes, Enkrid is an extraordinary person who pushes forward without backing down. Suddenly his skills improved, and glimpses of something unimaginable became apparent. However, for mortals, death is the worst experience in any form. To endure it would require an incredible amount of cultivation, something most wouldn't even attempt.
9 out of 10 priests who serve the god of patience and hardship failed.
That was the nature of the sword tutor. Now there are only a few such swords left across the continent, and yet here was one. For collectors, this would be a highly sought-after item, one worth pouring out gold to acquire.
To think that this trap involves such an item.
It seemed the veil would not open unless handled by a truly skilled wizard. Though Luagern was not deeply knowledgeable about magic, she knew enough. She tried striking the veil with a whip, but as expected, it didn't even leave a scratch. It was clearly a frustrating situation.
Let me try again.
In the midst of this, Kreis once again grasped the sword.
They keep chasing like berserkers.
He released the sword as quickly as he had grabbed it. Holding and releasing it was no big deal. That was the essence of the cursed sword tutor.
If you let go of the sword, you can return.
You can give up at any time if you wish. Giving up is easy. However, the curse tied to the sword tutor would never be lifted. Crossing the ridge of death would be impossible unless one had a peculiar disposition to feel exhilaration upon dying. Of course, Enkrid himself was not such a masochist.
It doesn't seem that hard.
He couldn't help but think this way, after all. Hadn't he been through similar things before? He wondered if another barrier would appear, perhaps causing the ferryman to show up again, but that didn't seem to be the case.
Damn, I really thought this was as simple as picking up a fairy tale by the roadside.
Kreis, who sometimes became clueless when faced with Krona, expressed his frustration repeatedly.
Should we ration our food to last as long as possible? Won't the veil thin out over time?
Finn suggested a practical approach, worrying about the future.
This is an unexpected turn.
Even Luagern expressed her frustration, scratching her head. Enkrid remained calm. He calmly grasped the sword again.
Enki.
Luagern raised her voice, which was uncharacteristic, but that was the end of it. Soon he was back in the mire. It was the second time. As soon as Enkrid stepped onto the muddy ground and perceived his surroundings, he immediately swung his sword. He struck horizontally, pushing the opponent's blade away. The opponent's sword, which seemed to retreat, twisted and stabbed at his side. Enkrid quickly reacted, swinging his sword downward. A clear sound rang out as the blades clashed. Whoosh! Wind blew from somewhere and the mist cleared. A figure with a blue flame in its metal head and partial plate armor on its body appeared.
heart of great strength.
It didn't move.
It feels unfair that this doesn't work, though.
It didn't matter. He just needed to understand that this was a mental world, the front yard of a malevolent spirit, or something similar. He had experienced this once before. Though it was just once, there had been countless times when he had risked his life and gone through similar situations. Thanks to those experiences, some things only needed to be experienced once. For instance, understanding the situation just once was enough. Therefore, even if Enkrid wasn't familiar with the current situation, he could remain calm.
Ah,
His voice came out. He tried speaking, and it seemed to work fine. Can you speak? The answer came not in words, but with a sword. A suit of armor wielding a sword charged at him, kicking up the thick mud. It was a heavy strike, a downward slash from above. It combined speed and strength, and the trajectory was tricky. Enkrid blocked it in the same manner. He blocked and pushed. The opponent then thrust at his side in the same way. Enkrid's response was identical. As he repeated these identical actions, like a play, the opponent's blade suddenly rose. No, it was a pre-planned move from the beginning. The rising blade from below aimed to pierce his chin. Enkrid bent his left knee and twisted his body. The blade narrowly missed his chin, grazing his right cheek and brushing past his forehead. Thanks to the gap created by dodging, Enkrid's sword slashed at the opponent's waist.
did he block that too?
As they continued to exchange blows, Enkrid got caught up in the situation. He swung his sword repeatedly. He tried to open the gate of sixth sense to read the opponent's intentions, but failed. The consequence came physically. The opponent's metal blade stabbed Enkrid in the chest. Luagurney would have been shocked if she had been stabbed in such a vital spot. A dull pain spread from his heart throughout his body. He died again. This was the second death. However, his body was still intact. His heart was racing, and there was pain, but he wasn't truly dead. So this is what's supposed to be difficult. No, isn't this actually not that bad? It seemed much better than actually dying.
Were you stabbed there?
Luagarn was right next to him. Enkrid nodded and stood up. After taking a few breaths, he felt fine. He could move. He wasn't seriously injured.
Grasping the sword causes the pain of death. The moment is brief, and the task is to learn swordsmanship.
It was strangely familiar in some way.
It's foolish. Attempting it is foolish unless you want to go insane.
But was Luagarne always this nagging? Enkrid recalled the first time he repeated this day. The thrusting technique from then had become second nature and now felt like his own skill. He also saw Frog, who was absorbed in nagging, in the background. And the sword he had been holding until recently, the cursed sword tutor, supposedly housed a malevolent spirit skilled in swordsmanship.
Is this really how it's supposed to be done?
Enkrid calmly ignored the nagging. Instead, he swung his sword, displaying a form he had learned from observing his opponent. His intention was clear, to train or discipline himself. Luagan, who had stopped talking, stared at Enkrid without blinking. Luagan muttered aloud what she had been thinking internally.
Did you hit your head? Are you already injured?
Enkrid didn't shake his head or add any explanation in response to Luagarne's words. He simply swung his sword, muttering to himself. It was as if he was trying to recall a specific trajectory.
Was it like this?
To Luagarne, Enkrid seemed slow, very slow. He was a person remarkably lacking in the talent for moving his body or handling a sword.
I've been teaching him directly, and this is as far as he's gotten.
Luagarne considered herself a scholar. Not the kind who sits and reads books all day, like other frogs. She also studied swordsmanship. Luagarne had a deep understanding that significantly influenced the swordsmanship of the leading families in the central continent. She wasn't an old frog without reason. She was recognized more for her skills in other areas than for her martial prowess. Among those skills, her ability to teach stood out. Despite this, Enkrid's progress was incredibly slow. Of course, there were moments that defied understanding. In moments of seemingly impossible crises, he suddenly made significant improvements. No preparation, signs, or indications. His skills just suddenly improved. Luagarne had never encountered such a person. Someone who was incomprehensible, inexplicable, and could not be understood by any measure she knew.
Can you watch this for me? We're trapped anyway.
At his casual request, Luagarne spoke up again.
You really seem like you've hit your head.
Kia.
The panther lying next to them nodded.
Are you sure you're okay?
Chryse asked.
What is it? You're not possessed by an evil spirit, are you?
Finn asked, her voice filled with concern. Enkrid calmly swung his sword again. It couldn't be said to be perfect, in fact it was clumsy. But to Luagarne's eyes, the intent of the sword was visible. If the opponent were in front of him, he would drive them to the left and then thrust. Enkrid moved similarly. There were issues with his footwork and a few other things, though. So, Enkrid was currently trying to implement the form. Just as Luagarne was about to say something,
I think I'll watch it again.
Enkrid said, then immediately grasped the sword again.
He's completely insane.
Luagarne was suddenly impressed. Luagarne didn't show any signs of confusion. In a situation like this, suddenly training in swordsmanship seemed absurd, even for a madman, but somehow it also seemed like the correct response.
Because it's Enkrid.
Because it was Enkrid, it somehow made sense. Soon Enkrid, who had been trembling while holding the sword, let it go and stepped back.
Has he given up?
Giving up once is easy. It becomes even easier the second time. Once you step back, a tutor becomes an insurmountable wall. For Enkrid, that would be a critical flaw. Luagarne watched with concern.
It wouldn't be good to show another technique.
Enkrid muttered, then picked up the sword again without even taking a breath.
Well, our platoon is called the Madman Platoon.
Chryse said indirectly. Or rather, was that being direct? It seemed like they were calling Enkrid a madman. A commotion, perhaps. While Esther was still lying down asleep, Enkrid picked up and put down the sword 4 more times, showing a slight smile.
This is it.
Then he swung his sword through the air. At this point, Luagarne realized that trying to stop him was pointless. What should he do then?
What a madman.
Admire him.
That's not it.
Teach him. Enkrid welcomed Luagarne's guidance. Winning a fight and mastering swordsmanship were different matters. Luagarne had rich experience and excellent swordsmanship. He could parry, strike, and read the opponent's intentions. It was like a conversation with swords, an orchestra conducted by blades. Enkrid memorized everything he saw and experienced, and Luagarne helped him. Even the evil spirit residing in the tutor had excellent swordsmanship, but was not as skilled as Luagarne. If there was only one ring attached to that sword, something that would activate with the lightest touch, perhaps Luagarne could have resolved it. Chryse had experimented, and nothing happened when he just touched the sword with his finger. It required a firm grip with a certain amount of force, so it was beyond Luagarne's capability. He tried several more times, but the result was the same.
I can see it, but
The time was too short to do anything, and after that only Enkrid continued to hold the sword.
It seems like things are going well.
Finn muttered as she prepared her sleeping area. She pulled out a blanket from her backpack, took out a piece of hard cheese, peeled the outer layer with a knife, and sliced it thinly. She then placed the cheese on a piece of hard bread, completing his meal preparation.
Since it's partly my responsibility.
For some reason, Chryse stepped forward and grabbed the sword, and then he died. His body remained intact, but his spirit was shattered. It happened when Enkrid wasn't holding the sword. Chryse foamed at the mouth and collapsed, a pointless act. Esther kept sleeping, and naturally, their roles became clear. Enkrid returned after putting down the sword. Frog taught him swordsmanship based on that. Finn and Chryse prepared the sleeping arrangements and food. Esther ate, slept, and woke up. There wasn't a convenient place for them to relieve themselves, so they all did their business in the corners. The curtain blocked everything underground, but they could dig a little bit into the ground. It was like a roughly hemispherical prison with a slightly raised bottom. They would relieve themselves in the area they had dug out.
we can go over a week without needing to relieve ourselves if necessary.
Frog's comment made Finn nod in agreement, expressing envy. After a full day passed, Luagarne was quietly impressed. Originally, she had so many things she wanted to say, advice to give. It was almost boiling inside her. What she had been saying to him so far seemed insufficient. Originally, she would have condensed what she needed to say for the journey back. But at this moment, it seemed like words were no longer necessary for Enkrid. What did Enkrid need for the future? She was about to provide an answer to this question.
He's already finding the answer.
Still, a few words of advice might be necessary. Chryse kept quiet, thinking it was his fault. It was a simple task, like picking up a coin from the ground, but suddenly they were trapped in a situation where they couldn't see an inch ahead. His mind was busy spinning, trying to find a way out of this place. Of course, an answer was not easily forthcoming.
I was blinded by Krona.
It was a situation that arose because he hadn't considered the worst-case scenario, and Kreis reflected on his mistake. As the situation took a strange turn, Finn completely gave up thinking. She simply observed Enkrid.
He's practicing swordsmanship even here.
It could be seen as consistent, but to surpass the tutor, sword practice was necessary. Even so,
You can't really call it normal.
that's what she thought when she looked at Enkrid. Or rather, behind that exceptional skill was probably this kind of madness. Watching this, Finn felt something new filling her heart, a small or perhaps greater realization. She had set her own limits at some point and had stopped progressing. Meeting Enkrid had been breaking down all those limits one by one, and today she finally grasped the beginning of a realization.
Limits are not something I set.
Kara's style martial arts the qualifications as a ranger. Had she not tried to go beyond these, and why had she stopped?
Because everyone said it was the right thing to do.
But Enkrid was different. Even without saying it, his actions, attitude, and the way he looked at life said something else. Finn quietly embraced the wave of inspiration. It was something unexpected, but it kept her mouth shut. Esther was in a state of self-recrimination.
It was such a petty curse, something so insignificant that it could hardly be called a curse.
It was something hard to call even a spell, and to think she hadn't noticed it and got trapped. If it were before, back when she was still a human, she would have bitten her tongue and died immediately. There were reasons for her failure. She had exhausted her magical energy by casting enhancement spells on Enkrid's sword and constantly reinforcing her body. Everything had been too much. Her body was bound by the curse, and her magic realm was closed off, so she had been using shortcuts. All of these had backfired, leaving her weakened.
Even so,
How could she not notice something so trivial? She had ignored what she needed to do immediately. She had thought the journey back would be leisurely, so she hadn't focused on recovery. Esther needed time to recover her lost strength and dissipated energy. Whatever might happen next, she wouldn't just stand by and watch. Esther lay down, burying her head and trying to nap. At most, she estimated it would take a week to recover enough magical power to break through this pathetic barrier. She thought about this as she fell half asleep. Amidst these intertwined and complicated situations, a strange time passed.
Knowing what's lacking in yourself is important.
Amid all this, Luagarne didn't hold back in teaching. It was different from the swordsmanship of the tutor. It was purely instruction. Winning a fight and mastering swordsmanship were different matters, and Enkrid was acutely aware of this. Luagarne was an excellent teacher. It was clear that she was better than any instructor at the training school where Enkrid had spent Krona.
What happens if you don't hold any cards in a card game?
This was Luagarne's question. For Enkrid, it was a new way of looking at things. Her next words surprised him and made him realize once again how excellent a teacher Luagarne was. She was someone who could not only teach but also guide and set milestones.
Basics. Start with the basics. Whatever you do, you need to build your body first. If you don't know how to hold a sword, you can't lift it. If you can't lift it, you can't swing it. You need to have a clear vision to move forward. Do you always have to hold a sword? What's left is to think and reflect. You must burn the candle of life with contemplation. Until it goes out, you have to burn using your own body as fuel. If you don't die, you'll gain something. Why not just farm? Do you have to wield a sword?
There were countless instructors. They always said the same thing. The basics are important, so he focused on the basics. He tried hard, kept his eyes wide open, and moved his feet quickly. He didn't swing his sword carelessly. Even so, he often heard those same words, that he should just farm. Did he really have to wield a sword?
If someone sits at a gambling table with a lot of silver coins, what should they hold in their hand?
At first, Luagarne tried to discourage him and found it absurd, but she seemed to find the situation somewhat enjoyable. Well, Enkrid might be imagining it. Reading Frog's expression was not easy for humans. It was just a feeling she had.
You can't sit at a gambling table without cards. Exactly, cards. Right now, you're just a fool sitting with a bag of silver coins.
Silver coins were the basics. No one sits at a gambling table without any coins. But also, no one sits there with just a few coins. Why did he feel a sense of pride hearing those words?
They said to build a foundation.
And now, they said that the foundation had been built. He had sought out and learned the Valen mercenary sword technique as a way to lash out against his slow progress. So, could the mercenary sword technique become that card?
It can. But what's even better is a sword technique honed over time. The Valen mercenary sword technique is ultimately too specialized in its attack methods. If all the cards in your hand are jokers, you can't use them.
What a perfect metaphor. Jokers only shine when combined with other cards. The same was true for the Valen mercenary sword technique. Regenerative healing, Leonesis Oniak defined branches of swordsmanship. People in later generations created swordsmanship based on those branches. Even Northern-style heavy swordsmanship had multiple variations. The same was true for the Central Continent's correct sword technique, mixing what's appropriate from the regenerative healing technique. Combining trial and error with one's talent created swordsmanship. What Luagarn referred to was one of these styles. Specifically, the swordsmanship learned through the tutor.
This is a cursed sword, but what's contained within is real.
In reality, Enkrid had rarely learned swordsmanship beyond the basics. Everything was superficial. Luagarni emphasized the necessity of mastering swordsmanship once more.
If you properly learn a sword technique derived from the correct sword technique, it will feel like your opponent can read your every move.
He had experienced this multiple times. The evil spirit within the sword was doing something similar.
I see.
Enkrid nodded, his eyes still blazing with intensity. The reflection of torchlight in his usually blue eyes made them appear tinged with red. Enkrid showed his emotions openly. When it came to learning, something Luagarn found fascinating.
He really is a sword-obsessed maniac.
Or simply, a sword fanatic. Everything he had learned and practiced so far was more preparation for handling a sword than actual sword technique. This was the essence of what Luagarni had conveyed. Enkrid realized this while learning swordsmanship from the tutor.
Let me go fetch some swordsmanship.
He joked as he grasped the sword again. It was repetition, learning swordsmanship through a process that felt much gentler and more serene than actual death. To put it simply,
It's an easy and enjoyable task.
that's how it was for Enkrid. Enkrid picked up the sword, moved his body from side to side briefly, and then returned. Blinking, he shook his head.
Did it happen again?
This time my legs were completely cut off.
He spoke with an astonishingly calm demeanor.
The final strike was supposed to be a downward slash, but it ended up being a diagonal neck cut.
He had observed the process, so he understood it. So, what was needed here? Enkrid picked up the broken sword he had been using instead of a wooden one, still in its scabbard. Luagarn's heart pounded without her realizing it, her cheeks puffed up with excitement.
You are truly...
An incredibly fascinating person. Even the tutor couldn't limit him. No, look at this. His mind had already surpassed the tutor. The message was clear. She couldn't teach him new swordsmanship, as she was bound by certain agreements. But she could guide him in what he had already learned. She did just that. He would go in, learn techniques, and come out to replicate them. It was possible because he had complete control over his body. Luagarn would then refine what he had learned. Once he mastered it, he would pick up the sword again. This time, Enkrid mentioned that his fingers had been cut off.
And then he thrust at the neck, with the blade curving like a snake. He used a wrist snap.
This was Luagarn's response. Despite appearing tired with dark circles under his eyes, Enkrid remained composed. He took breaks occasionally, as neglecting to eat and drink would damage the body. While resting, Finn gazed at the sword and muttered,
It reminds me of an old legend. Something about pulling a sword to become a king.
Enkrid, who was resting, also heard this. Becoming a king just by pulling out a sword. Even for a legend, it seemed overly simplistic. A king is a person entangled in politics and various circumstances. Legends and stories are inherently exaggerated, so well. Afterward, Enkrid continued to immerse himself in swordsmanship. He had already picked up and put down the sword over 100 times. It should have seemed like self-torture. Yet Enkrid remained indifferent. The pain lingered in his body, but for someone repeating the same day, it felt somehow diminished.
It works.
Enkrid felt a renewed thrill in learning swordsmanship. It took just a day and a half. Instead of repeating the day by dying, he could immediately exchange quality swordsmanship by simply holding the sword. He spared no time and immersed himself completely. A short but intense period passed. It was enough.
Now it's done.
These words came from Luagurney. Was it thanks to the tutor? No, it wasn't that. Above all, Enkrid was different from before. He was vastly different from the time when he struggled with minimal talent. Enkrid reflected on the day. He pondered and reviewed everything he had gone through, wondering how he had overlooked certain things. What had he gained from it? Though it was a time that couldn't be easily described, if he had to sum it up, Enkrid could do so in 2 words.
Talent.
The feeling of standing out among others had ingrained itself into his well-structured body. From the heart of the beast to the sense of evasion, he had trained his body, increasing his strength, agility, and reaction speed. He had mastered complete control over his body. He had also enhanced his boldness, focus, and senses to support himself.
What are you?
Luagurn was astonished. It seemed like he had developed a talent that hadn't been there before. As he grasped the sword once more, soon with the feel of the wet ground, a metallic figure lunged at him. The swords clashed. The difference this time was that Enkrid had now grasped the opponent's swordsmanship. Just endure a death-like experience that is much easier than actual death. Just endure it if only you can. There was a living textbook. It demonstrated each movement in detail right before your eyes. This was a good thing regardless of being a cursed sword or an evil spirit, at least for Enkrid.
Think about why you're moving your left foot to the side there.
There was also a teacher who meticulously interpreted the textbook, so this was only natural. Enkrid absorbed the swordsmanship like a sponge soaking up water. No, it was etched into his body first, and understanding came later. He learned this while mastering the sense of evasion.
Is there a need to understand?
When he didn't understand, he just rolled his body to see. By repeating, he etched it into his body and left the understanding for later.
You're definitely crazy, no doubt about it.
Luagurney said with a hint of admiration. Enkrid barely listened. He was completely immersed in the swordsmanship at that moment. In reality, it was incredibly enjoyable. What was the original reason for learning the Valen mercenary sword technique? It was a thirst that began from within. He wanted proper skills and swordsmanship. A foundation that would give him the strength to move forward.
From the basics!
It was what every teacher, every instructor, everyone who had taken his silver coins had said. It wasn't that it was bad or that he hated it, just.
It's fun.
As is natural for humans, he just wanted to see what came next. Thus, Enkrid gripped the sword repeatedly, smiling, a smile, a bright smile, a pure smile.
Honestly, you're starting to scare me.
Luagurn said.
I agree, it's chilling.
Finn agreed while Kreis was surprisingly calm.
He's always been like this, but it's particularly intense right now.
Kreis had seen Enkrid do countless crazy things. He was rather glad he was laughing. It's better than not smiling and silently swinging the sword until his palms burst. Holding a cursed sword and experiencing a death-like state, it's something Kreis wouldn't even dream of doing.
But I think the platoon leader could endure it.
It was just a thought that came to him. A blend of intuition and insight. Kreis saw through the essence of it. As long as there was the joy of growth, Enkrid could transform the pain of death into effort. He was that immersed. In the sword and himself, in swordsmanship. A sword is a tool for killing people. Swordsmanship is a method for killing the opponent.
Feet, waist, posture, everything is for the next move, think.
With Luagurney's words added, Enkrid kept thinking and swung his sword. He kept holding the cursed sword without rest, in pursuit of an excellent textbook. There were even times he released his grip and re-gripped right after dying. After countless such attempts, it seemed as if the evil spirit hesitated. Was that right? Did he see it correctly? Enkrid doubted it. It was strange that the thing that had always rushed at him didn't immediately swing its sword. It was truly something Enkrid didn't want.
Let's not do this. Let's do our best from our respective positions.
In their respective roles, the evil spirit was determined to dig into and stir the mind of the one wielding the sword, to do their best. Hesitating was not what he wanted to see. Enkrid sincerely urged the evil spirit to fulfill its duty. They charged, fought, trained in swordsmanship, learned, memorized, mastered, pondered, and reviewed. He gripped the sword again, And he repeated this. If one knows how to use their body properly, if they can implement what they imagine exactly, then all that was left was to understand the movements. By memorizing the entirety of a swordsmanship and hearing Luagarna's interpretation of each move, it became an easy task. If the creator who made the cursed sword and imbued it with an evil spirit saw this, they would grab Enkrid by the scruff. But isn't that how the world works? Things don't always go as planned or expected.
Well done.
The evil spirit had its chest cut and neck severed. A blue light flickered between the pieces of metal as if trying to say something. Enkrid silently watched the evil spirit. Soon, the spirit within the sword spoke.
Thank you.
Thankful for what? The spirit told its story. It was quite a long one.
Make it short.
Enkrid didn't particularly want to listen. The spirit was taken aback, the blue light dimmed. It spoke shortly and concisely out of necessity.
I was wrongfully captured, and my swordsmanship is incomplete, a half-finished technique. Finding the other half was my lifelong wish.
How does a mere swordsman become an evil spirit? It required the power of spells and incantations. And before that it needed the deep resentment of the entity becoming the spirit. The spirit's wish was similar to Enkrid's. One dreamed of being a knight.
It's the lost swordsmanship of my family.
One wished to properly restore the swordsmanship. In terms of desperation, they were similar. Enkrid nodded. It meant that he would do it if given the opportunity. He was already busy pursuing his own dreams. He couldn't shoulder someone else's dream as well. At the last moment, as the blue light flickered and vanished, a faint human figure appeared and spoke.
And let's not meet again.
The spirit was tired, exhausted. It truly never wanted to see someone like Enkrid again. It was sincere. Of course, there was little chance of them meeting again. One would disappear. As the curse on the spirit was lifted, sending it far away, the other would remain on this land. The soul that had been an evil spirit was quite content with that.
Really, let's not meet again.
It said the same thing once more. Enkrid tilted his head in confusion. Why say that when it was the spirit who had caused the trouble?
The name of my family is?
The last words were inaudible. The energy dissipated. Everything around began to crumble. Beyond the collapsing world, familiar faces came into view. As Enkrid left the mental world, the spirit within the sword vanished.
You won.
Luagarni's voice was heard. It was reality. Enkrid nodded.
Was it dangerous?
Luagarn asked again, and Enkrid shook his head. It wasn't dangerous. Once inside, the only thing that remained was swordsmanship. It was a battle of wits. He had to overcome his opponent with swordsmanship, not strength. He had gripped the sword well over 100 times, but didn't bother to count. It had taken a full day. The gray barrier disappeared without a sound. As it vanished, Esther looked up and glared at Enkrid. It was certain she glared. Esther was surprised. How did he manage to do it? Banishing an evil spirit through divine or magical means and purifying it physically by brute force are entirely different matters.
The latter is a challenging feat even for a highly skilled wizard.
Currently a panther, Esther was once a sorceress and witch who mastered the realm of spells. From her perspective, what Enkrid had done was unbelievable. Thus it was both astonishing and curious.
How is that even possible?
In reality, the soul was purified through relentless, almost deathly, practice of swordsmanship, and because the evil spirit conveyed its wish. However, Esther had no way of knowing this. Esther blinked repeatedly in surprise, which Enkrid noticed.
What? Hungry?
Enkrid asked, waving his hand. Esther snorted in disbelief and lay back down. She decided it must have been a coincidence. Even if she delved deeper, there would be no answers. Enkrid, watching Esther, felt a sense of admiration. For a panther, she had a remarkably expressive face. It was amusing to watch. Even now, when he asked if she was hungry, she seemed to show a hint of disdain around her eyes. Enkrid chuckled softly and sat down. His legs weren't shaking, but he had swung his sword all day, literally without a moment's rest, and had mentally experienced a death-like state. It would be a lie to say he wasn't tired. Still,
Kreis was right.
wasn't it like picking up a fallen coin? To Enkrid, this event felt like that. Only, what he thought was a coin turned out to be gold. He had learned a new swordsmanship technique. But how much had he improved? It's hard to gauge. It depends on the standard you set. However, he had gained a bit of confidence instead of arrogance.
The soldier ranking system of Norilia is meaningless.
In the end, he needed Rem. Perhaps he should try to scratch Rem's cheek with his axe. It was a refreshing goal.
Let's rest and leave tomorrow,
Enkrid said. It seemed reasonable. The gray barrier was gone, and there was no danger. It was a perfect place to stay for the night, with no insects and a comfortably cool atmosphere, so the group decided to spend the night there. As Enkrid lay down, he dreamt. In his dream, the evil spirit reappeared.
Let's have another match.
It said. Enkrid nodded. This time he won easily. Understanding begins with the movement, but what if he memorized everything? If the opponent only repeats the memorized moves, there is no reason to lose. There was also a bit of understanding added to it. The reason for moving the left foot to the side was to prepare for a thrust after cutting the top of the head. Twisting the wrist in response to the dozens of movements an opponent might make while dodging or blocking allows for an unexpected strike. Basic techniques connect to each other, forming a single flow. This was swordsmanship. Reflecting on this anew, everything in the dream was torn apart, and suddenly, a ferryman appeared in the void. He said nothing. He showed no intentions. He just looked aggrieved.
using my curse for something else.
It seemed as if it was saying that. Enkrid lightly placed his right hand on his waist and saluted, expressing his regret. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the cave. It was just a meaningless dream.
You slept peacefully.
As he woke, Luagern spoke.
Didn't you sleep?
I did.
Luagern, who had been staring at Enkrid, asked.
You're really determined to become a knight, aren't you?
Without saying anything, Enkrid nodded.
Indeed.
Luagern said calmly.
It doesn't necessarily have to be in this country, does it?
The words that followed were meaningful, but there was no chance to ask further. With that, Luagern turned away, as if not wanting to discuss it any further. What she said wasn't a question, but advice. Knowing this, Enkrid didn't press the matter.
This country, huh?
As a child, he hadn't understood the concept of a country. As he grew older, he realized that being a knight bound by an oath of loyalty wasn't what he had dreamed of. So, was there another path? It wasn't something he needed to worry about just yet.
When the time comes, I'll decide then.
He would follow his heart and choose the right path. That's how he had lived so far. Call it conviction or stubbornness. It was a way that worked for him.
Let's go.
Enkrid was just about to say that when
Oh,
Krace's surprised voice rang out.
there's a secret box under the chest.
Krace looked up and met Enkrid's eyes. Whatever Dolph's intention was, it was clear he enjoyed playing tricks on people, emptying the chest and diverting their attention with a letter, then trapping them in a dungeon with a cursed sword, only to reward those with sharp eyes.
Ancient gold coins.
Something valuable had been found. The current currency was the Empire's money. The standard currency in Krona was imperial copper, silver, and gold coins. This standard had been established for over 100 years. Naturally, anything called Krona would refer to imperial currency. From such ancient times, something from the borderline between history and legend had appeared. While not exactly priceless, if it found the right owner, it could be worth 10 times its weight in gold. There were more than 10 such coins. Each coin was the size of a palm, so they weren't small. The pouch was heavy.
Divide it.
Enkrid said. Krace looked disappointed but soon nodded. He even handed some to Luagern, who had refused to take any.
We're taking this, right?
Krace asked, as if it were obvious. He was referring to the sword stuck in the ground. Before the words even finished, Enkrid stood in front of the sword again. The madman wielding the sword had been freed and sent to another world, beyond the realm of reality. So, what was left?
It's obviously valuable.
Krace said. Enkrid gripped the sword with one hand and pulled it out. It felt like a superhuman strength, perhaps from frequently using the heart of great strength, but he felt stronger than before. The pulled-out sword was dirty, but the edge was still alive. It seemed it just needed sharpening. He swung it a few times, and while the balance was decent, the handle and pommel needed a lot of work.
It has the strength to be honored as an honorary frog.
Luagern praised him in a manner typical of a frog.
You're not gonna sell that, are you?
Krace asked.
No, I won't sell it.
Since both swords were in disarray, Enkrid and his group packed up and began their journey back. There were still few monsters and magical creatures to be seen. Whether due to the aftermath of the large colony or not, even the usual bandits were nowhere to be found. Finn, showing remarkable resilience, occasionally asked Enkrid for martial arts sparring along the way. They couldn't have a full fight, so they engaged in slow-paced tactical movements. Since learning swordsmanship, Enkrid had become more skillful, and Finn never won a bout. Then Luagurney left.
Well, I'm off.
See you again!
It was a simple farewell. Chryse waved and Finn gave a slight nod. Esther didn't pay much attention. Luagurn didn't seem particularly regretful as she turned away. Watching the frog leave alone, Enkrid seemed to forget any feelings of regret and turned away himself.
She left so suddenly.
She was staying because of the platoon leader, so it's not surprising.
Chryse voiced his thoughts succinctly.
Enchantment.
Don't.
It's the nickname Enkrid found most annoying. Something about enchantment.
Enchantment.
Chryse repeated, raising his eyebrows. Enkrid didn't hold back.
This is the Aelkara-style wrist twist. It's good to learn.
With those words, he twisted Chryse's wrist, eliciting a scream. Chryse's cry echoed in the summer sky. Without further incident, the group returned to the border guard. Thus, Enkrid and his group made their way back to the city. Meanwhile, the higher-ups who had dispatched a priest from the sacred cult of the demon realm received surprising news. Failed. The bishop, who managed the diocese and was the priest's direct superior, asked. He was a strikingly handsome man with thick blonde eyebrows, wearing a white robe with gold embroidery. He repeated the question with a look of disbelief.
Did a knight order come?
That wasn't the case.
What? A platoon leader? A panther?
Learning who was responsible left him even more astonished. The structure of the cult was similar to that of a regular temple. It consisted of the pope, followed by cardinals, bishops, priests, and believers. Occasionally, monks were interspersed between priests and believers. Usually, when referring to a high priest, it meant a bishop or higher. The blonde man was precisely that bishop. Outwardly, he had other statuses as well, and none of them were of low rank. He was a bishop who had grown into a very sturdy tree from among the seeds scattered by the cult.
Are you saying we failed because of a mere platoon leader?
Yes. The bishop frowned at the words of the lower priest. His once handsome face twisted ferociously.
What?
Could a platoon leader really bring down the Knoll colony?
It wasn't a knight from the order who interfered.
No, indeed that wouldn't make sense.
The bishop shook his head at his own words. Would the kingdom of Norillia have the capacity to dispatch knights or troops here right now? It was an absurd thought. There were too many matters to address immediately, and there were even unresolved issues piling up. Bandits known as the Black Blade were rampaging throughout the kingdom's territories. To the west, there was a city of raiders formed by settlers banding together. To the east, there was a country ruled by the human butcher that provocatively acted at the slightest provocation. It would have been fortunate if this were the end of it, but problems overflowed from every direction like a flood.
For instance, the power struggle between the nobility and the royalty.
When all was said and done, everything could be attributed to the divided factions of the royalists and the nobles. The kingdom's strength was fractured. As a result, other factions began to encroach, looking for opportunities. Although they had recently struck a blow to Aspen, which had been picking a fight from the north.
Wasn't that a bit much?
The bishop thought so. They had pulled some forces stationed in the south and west to strike Aspen. Yes, it was unavoidable. Had they left it alone, the entire Green Pearl Plain in the north would have been lost. But the bishop had expected them to merely hold the line and maintain the status quo, yet Norillia had won a decisive victory. Nevertheless, the effort to fend off Aspen had drained their strength. Taking advantage of the shortage, the city of raiders in the west stealthily moved in. The human butcher kingdom in the southeast also advanced. What about the Black Blade bandits? Would they just watch? Moreover, the south of the kingdom was plagued by monsters, casting a shadow over the southern region. There were reports of refugees lining up. But would it end just because Aspen retreated?
What about the conflicts between the remaining cities?
If Aspen retreated, what would be left? The Green Pearl would remain. Moreover, trade routes in all directions would be open. Then everyone would be desperate to grab a bigger piece of the pie. With the kingdom exhausted, mediation would be out of the question.
It's a miracle it's not ruined already.
Given the state of the kingdom, it was no wonder the bishop was here. There were many gaps and plenty of spoils, many rotten places. How could he ignore such a tempting piece of meat? It wasn't without reason that the sacred cult of Demon Realm had established itself here. What about the resources and capital invested in this place? This area was sufficient to become a new Demon Realm. It could become a sanctuary. The damage caused by the failure of one such preparation was indeed disheartening.
Because of a mere platoon leader.
How much krona was invested in preparing for this? It wasn't just a few gold coins. What about the armament provided to the gnolls? The investment of krona made was now in the hands of the pioneer village. As a reward, Enkrid received some monetary compensation. To be precise, it was Kreis who acted as an intermediary and received it. The bishop wasn't aware of this detail. He was simply displeased. What to do? After a brief deliberation, was it just a mere platoon leader? Was he just lucky? In reality, no one from their side had witnessed Enkrid's fight. There were a few surviving monsters, but they weren't capable of conveying the details. It was likely just luck. Upon reflection, that seemed plausible. The wall was sturdy. A member of the cult had probably been accidentally discovered, and in the process of managing the situation, the priest's identity was exposed. Moreover, by coincidence, preparations had already been made at a siege level. But weren't there too many coincidences? Perhaps there was some level of skill involved. However, the conclusion was that it was luck. So then,
Even if he's lucky, will that luck hold forever?
that seemed unlikely.
Send someone skilled in assassination.
The bishop decided to handle the problem with restraint if needed. Of course, he never received any news of Enkrid's assassination. The bishop wasn't even listening to such news. He was simply preparing for the next step. If he were a member of the kingdom, what would be the biggest issue? Not the Black Blade, the monster rampages, or the predatory neighboring countries. Their greatest issue would be the cultists, and among those they called cultists, he was the backbone in this area. The bishop prepared for what was next, soon forgetting about Enkrid. Occasionally, such extraordinary individuals emerged. Sometimes they were even mere soldiers, but it was always temporary. Survived among 1,000 monsters? Let's say it was a stroke of luck. What about next time? What if a similar crisis occurs? He was bound to die eventually, so he dismissed it. The border guard was unchanged. There was nothing different.
Have you arrived?
Well, there was something different. The soldier's attitude had completely changed towards Enkrid. A soldier on duty at the outer gates saluted, nodding. With a nod, he saw a familiar face.
Are you here to greet me?
It was the ferry company commander. She responded to Enkrid's joke with a playful tone.
Of course, I had to come if my fiancé was returning. If my betrothed came back missing a limb, especially an important one, I'd have to give up one of my life's pleasures.
Wasn't the joke a bit inappropriate? While Enkrid thought so, the ferry company commander continued without a hint of laughter.
If you were missing arms, you wouldn't be able to hug me. But you seem fine since you have both arms intact.
The fairy's eyes scrutinized Enkrid's entire body. Something seemed different. Fairies had keen senses.
I need to report to the battalion commander.
Go ahead.
At Enkrid's words, the fairy nodded and continued on her way. It seemed she had other business to attend to, so it wasn't a greeting, it was just a coincidence. Enkrid saluted the departing fairy and turned back. Seeing how she left quickly, she indeed seemed to have something urgent.
It was just a coincidence, after all.
Could she really have come to greet me? It's not like she has nothing to do. There's no way that's the case. Upon entering the city, Esther disappeared.
Do I need to go too?
No.
Kreis was also sent away, leaving only Finn to accompany him. Finn fell silent, lost in thought, before suddenly speaking with a strangely assertive tone.
I've made up my mind.
About what?
I'm giving up on trying to take you down.
Was she still aiming for that?
Instead, I'll set my sights on Auden.
Finn's eyes sparkled with determination. Enkrid inwardly shook his head. As for himself, it was one thing, but Auden? Auden wasn't just deeply religious, he wielded divine power, which meant he was a priest. Of course, being a priest didn't mean he couldn't marry or be with a woman, but
That Auden?
that bear of a man embracing a woman? Hard to imagine. Enkrid could only nod quietly.
The squad leader of enchantment is beyond my reach.
Finn muttered nonsense, and then quickly went her own way.
Weren't you coming with me to report?
Apparently not. Left alone, Enkrid headed to Marcus's office. Upon entering, he saluted. Marcus observed him silently before speaking.
I've already received the report. However, there are conflicting opinions.
Conflicting opinions?
I'm not sure what you mean.
If you don't know, you don't know. Guessing only leads to unnecessary chatter. He had heard that there was communication from the pioneer village. Marcus rested his chin on his hand.
The pioneer village wants to name the wall after you, saying you slew 1,000 gnolls or something.
Were they seriously considering naming the wall after him? It seemed improbable that they would officially do something like that, but the village chief, Deutsche Pullman, and that craftsman seemed to be sincere. The fact that it was mentioned in an official report confirmed it. They were all crazy.
And the other opinion comes from the commander of the Viscount's army of Bentra. He suggests that you only killed about 50 gnolls and warns against exaggerating your achievements. Now, tell me, our platoon leader, which is the truth?
Enkrid responded immediately.
Believe what you want to believe.
Would he believe it just because Enkrid said so? Did his words carry that much weight? His counterpart was the battalion commander and a representative of the city. He likely already knew the answer. Moreover, his eyes were already speaking. Despite his weary-looking face, his eyes were smiling.
Is that so?
Yes, that's right.
Marcus scrutinized Enkrid closely. Where did such a person come from?
Still aspiring to be a knight?
Yes.
I see.
What was he trying to say?
I saw cultists.
Regardless, he needed to report the key issue. The pioneer village wasn't far from the border guard, and the presence of cultists was a sensitive matter.
Those bastards.
After expressing his view, Marcus removed his hand from his chin and took a sip of tea. The cold tea slid down his throat.
1,000 gnolls.
He didn't do it alone or all at once. Even for a knight-level fighter, that would be a daunting task. Marcus thought it was highly unlikely. Nonetheless, Enkrid's prowess couldn't be dismissed. After all, he didn't take the words of the Viscount's army of Bentra too seriously. Marcus knew Enkrid. Of course, it was hard to believe that he literally cut down a large colony, yet he must have achieved something significant. Had Marcus seen it firsthand, he might not think this way, but it was still a hard story to believe for anyone. What Enkrid did was just that. It wasn't that the commander of the Viscount's army of Bentra was an idiot. Though, to be fair, he was half an idiot. But the story was genuinely hard to believe. It was more likely that the entire village was simply ecstatic to have survived such a dire situation. After contemplating various thoughts, Marcus spoke.
Do you love this city?
I don't dislike it.
Do you have a lover?
No.
Perhaps?
I like women.
Talking with a perceptive person is comfortable and easy. Marcus nodded and said,
From this moment, your independent platoon is promoted to a company. You are now a company commander.
Is that right?
He had just returned from an external mission. Recognizing the merits of that mission wouldn't be a small matter. That was true. But hadn't there been conflicting reports? And now, a company commander?
My platoon doesn't even have 10 members.
Now it's a company.
What kind of company has fewer than 10 soldiers?
Does that make sense?
I'm the person in charge of this city. If I say it does, it does.
It seemed unreasonable.
Are you criticizing your superior with your eyes?
No, sir.
It still felt unreasonable.
It's not.
He's the battalion commander. What could Enkrid do? He just nodded. Saluting and finishing his report, he turned to leave.
I'd like it if you loved this city.
I'll try.
It was a model soldier's response. Saying that, he turned back toward his quarters.
You're back?
How should he describe this?
I don't think I'd even feel this way going back to the village I was born in.
It was just like that. It felt like coming home. Rem was watching as usual, holding an axe. The subtle expectation in his eyes urged Enkrid. Those eyes would not allow even a brief rest. Well, he never rested as soon as he arrived. The journey had been peaceful. He had rested enough along the way. Enkrid's gaze turned to Rem's face. The scars that had been on his face before he left were now completely gone. A new goal suddenly came to mind.
Sparring?
Enkrid spoke without thinking, his heart pounding. Rem's lips curved into a wide smile.
Did you get any better? They said you cut down hundreds of monsters. I heard you were flying. Let's see how much fun you had.
As Rem spoke, he gripped his axe with both hands and took a step forward. Enkrid felt a strange sensation. Before, he didn't understand what that step meant before a fight. No, he couldn't grasp it. But now, he understood. Right foot half a step forward, the first axe swing comes from the left. Rem showed all of this, naturally, from his center of gravity to his next move. He didn't even try to hide his intent. Whether he knew Enkrid could see it or not, Rem narrowed his eyes and looked at him.
This feels a bit strange, doesn't it?
Enkrid realized he wasn't standing in front of the usual barracks. Before Rem could respond, Ragna and the others started coming out one by one. There wasn't a single soldier around. Wait, there was a training ground set up, right in front of the barracks. The area was cleared, and a low fence had been erected.
They say the company commander made a private training ground for us?
It was Kreis who spoke, having arrived earlier. The perceptive Kreis had read Enkrid's thoughts. Why bother?
After we roughed them up a bit, the company commander said it was disruptive to other soldiers' training.
Rem, still full of spirit, pointed back with his thumb and spoke in a calm tone, as if saying it was no big deal.
Even barbarians aren't allowed to kill allies within the barracks. We were told to do it here.
Ragna chimed in from behind him.
It seems it's because of the noise. These guys are too rowdy. Not me.
Jackson gestured towards the group with a sweeping hand, adding his 2 cents.
Haha. It seems our brothers' camaraderie was so lively that the other soldiers wanted to join in, so the commander was considerate.
Auden also spoke, making it seem like they were welcoming Enkrid. The real reason for the training ground surely wasn't what they said. So this was a kind of joke. From starting as a group of troublemakers to becoming the Madman platoon, they now knew each other well enough to make such jokes.
Did you beat them up?
Enkrid's question made Rem frown.
Do I look like someone who goes around beating up others for fun?
You're the first person to make me speechless like this, Rem.
What was he talking about? He beat them up every day. Rem felt a bit unfairly treated. This time he hadn't beaten anyone. He was just so focused on sparring that he cleared away any distractions around him.
Do you really believe I beat them up?
Rem glared.
Yes.
Damn right answer.
Rem chuckled. That was the signal. After the smile, he grounded his stance. The direction of his center of gravity indicated the direction of his attack. Swordsmanship is a collection of techniques for killing people. It was a path he had honed and sharpened over time. The axe and sword clashed. A loud metallic clang echoed. Even though the sword wasn't sharp, its hardness surpassed any weapon he had wielded before. Once called a cursed sword, it was now just a sturdy sword, almost on par with a legendary sword. Enkrid had quickly become familiar with his new sword. Why, indeed, he had come back just to face this axe. The sword and axe clashed, a battle of wits and skills ensued. Enkrid's blade moved with a snake-like fluidity, significantly faster than before. This was one of the secret techniques of swordsmanship, utilizing a flick of the wrist. As the sword rebounded off the axe blade, it arsed upward, forcing Rem to tilt his head back. In response, he swiftly raised his axe and made a short, chopping motion. Enkrid also tilted his head to the side. Swish, swish. This left shallow cuts on both their cheeks. Rem narrowed his eyes and exhaled sharply, surprised, but prioritizing something else over that, fighting spirit and momentum. Rem's eyes gleamed with excitement. He then licked the drop of blood trickling down his lips and said,
Damn, that surprised me.
It was a genuine remark. The onlookers all widened their eyes. Enkrid and Rem had exchanged blows with sword and axe, and Enkrid had not been easily pushed back. It was a growth rate that could not be ignored. It was almost miraculous. Could this talentless person have transformed so dramatically upon returning? Everyone's eyes were filled with such words.